All right, Dirk. Well, there's many things that separate good companies, I think, from great ones. And there's things like innovation, execution, efficiency, humility, on and on and on. And one thing that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle, I think, is great management. And by great management, of course, we mean great management of what? People, right? Being able to find, retain, and develop your employees to reach their highest possible level of performance. It's truly the gift that keeps on giving. So organizations that do this consistently well generally do everything else well as well. And as a consequence, because great people are the building blocks of great companies, well, they have a lot of benefits from that. Well, our next guest today on the show is going to be joining us here in the studio, Kelly Graves. He recently wrote an article for us, and I think we have it. I can show it to you now. It ran it ran last week in Quality Digest Daily. I'll have to actually look at that article. It was, let's see here. It was the article, What You Don't Know About Your Employees That Will Help You Manage Them Better. Sorry about that. And it ran, last week in the Quality Digest newsletter. So, Kelly Graves, thanks again for joining us on the show.
It's great to be back.
Good to see you.
Nice to see both of you.
Yeah, thank you. So, let's start with this. What do we need to know to manage our employees better? Kind of the tease from your article.
The first thing is that people's personalities aren't set in stone. Some people are, some people aren't. But they're malleable. And so depending on the input that the manager provides the employee, you've got an ability to sway their judgment and their perception a little bit. And it really dates back to Carol Dweck's work on the mindset. And so there's certain people that have a fixed mindset, and those people believe that their talents and their knowledge is set in stone. And so if they run into some kind of a roadblock, what they try to do is either fake their way around it or just deal with the deficiency. Whereas those people, on the other hand, that have a growth mindset, they believe that they can overcome those events, and they see them as challenges. And so that's the way that we should be managing our people, is approaching them as if everyone has a growth mindset. People's ideas and the way their personality fits is not set in stone, even those with a fixed mindset. There's other research that I haven't written about that very clearly shows that.
So, all right, so you're dealing with two different types of people here. That may be employees in your company that you need to manage. So you need to suss out pretty quickly if that person has a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. So obviously, if the person has a growth mindset, that makes your job pretty easy, because that person is going to be kind of have the certain aspect and perspective to want to develop and grow and change. But somebody who has a fixed mindset, a very firmly fixed mindset, how do you encourage that person to get beyond their comfort zone and begin to grow a little bit more?
Well, you still want to take the same approach. And that is, when we give people positive reinforcement, that's the only way that people really learn. It's impossible to learn from saying, don't do it this way. Is you see them do it and then say, try it a little bit more like this. Or one of the words that Carol Dweck uses is, you're having a problem with that and you just haven't been able to achieve it yet. And what that does is that allows for a future where you can achieve it. So you always want to be approaching your employees as if they do have a growth mindset, and building on that. Even if they're messing up, focus on that one aspect that they're doing well in, develop that. Usually the trust factor between the manager and the employee will improve, and then from that relationship and that trust, then they'll be a little more flexible.
Well, how do you get people, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think very often a fixed mindset comes in from fear. I know what I'm doing, and nobody's yelled at me for what I'm doing, so what I'm doing must be okay, so I'm not going to go beyond that because I might get in trouble. I mean, I feel comfortable where I'm at, and everything's good.
Right.
So how do you get them to kind of let go of that fear? And I'm thinking it's fear.
It is. There's a lot of it that's fear. Some of it is set up, the way the person was raised, the environment, so on and so forth, their genetics. But a lot of it does come down to fear, in my experience. And what we want to do is have conversations with employees. And I know everyone out there, they don't have enough time. I mean, in every corporation that I consult with, there's never enough time. But if they would spend time with their employee and really talking and asking them questions, you've heard me say this before, ask them questions. What are your ideas in this? And you can't have a wrong answer. Let's just talk about it. Let's kick some ideas around. What is your best guess? Everybody's got a guess. So instead of putting it in black and white terms, what should we do about this? If you see that fear in their eyes, or you even perceive that there's some kind of fear, or you've had a problem with the employee before, say, hey, let's just sit here and kick some ideas around. Make it very non-committal to where, okay, we're just kicking ideas around. Everybody's got ideas. And then we can improve that, and then develop the relationship, develop the trust, and then start focusing on, that malleable part of their personality to where we can really help them develop that.
And you mentioned, just in that answer, you mentioned this idea that you're having a conversation with your employee. I mean, it's very much a 360-degree thing here, where you talk about you call it the management and employee development review, the MED review, the title of your book as well. So that really is not a review like many people maybe are familiar with, where the boss says, okay, you did this, you didn't do that.
Right.
Next month, we're going to do this, you're going to do that, or you're going to have this consequence, and we'll meet again in 12 months, and that's it. It's not like that.
No.
It's an ongoing process where you're talking all the time, and you're setting goals, and you're working on them together. But the employee is very much involved in that, as opposed to the manager dictating what's going on, I think.
Very much so. In fact, there's a diagram in my book that has a loop, and as the manager gives employee positive reinforcement, the employee in turn gives the manager positive reinforcement, but they're also having a dialogue. A dialogue is two-way, and that's what we need to do with employees. So when an employee fails, it wasn't the employee's fault. The manager has to take in my book I put 30%. In some aspects it's 40%. 30 to 40% of the blame goes to the manager because he or she did not train properly or thoroughly enough. They did not coach perhaps thoroughly enough. They didn't counsel. And so you've got to do the first three, because if you can't improve employee by training them thoroughly, coaching them, or counseling them, then you must terminate.
Right.
Okay?
Well, I would say, I would add to that, before all of that is they didn't hire properly. Because and sometimes maybe it's not the boss's fault. I mean, just to be on the side of some of the bosses out there,
Right.
Somebody else hires.
You inherit.
You inherit a really bad employee,
Right.
and there's nothing. You could be the best manager in the world,
Right.
and if you're stuck with a dog, you're stuck with a dog, and
Right.
what are you going to do in that case? You're just left with no other choice but to fire them. I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I mentioned that in the book, and there are things when you hire behaviors, not talents. You can always teach skills. And so many bosses, they look at the skills and not think about the behavior. How is this person going to fit in with the team, with the organization, with our culture? And so they look at the skill set, and it's hard to change behaviors, but it's easy to teach and train skills. And so that's where people make their biggest mistakes usually. But let's say we do inherit a problem employee. The best thing we can do, for one, our conscience, but two, just out of respect for the employee, the organization, and our culture, is to make sure that you go through those first three steps and really develop the relationship. Really tell the employee, look, we started off on the wrong foot, or the previous manager was XYZ. This is a whole new ball game. Because they may have had a poor manager before, and they certainly had previous poor managers before they ever entered your organization. So they've got all this baggage they're carrying, and so you've got a lot to overcome. And so that's why it's so important when you sit down to talk with an employee or a potential employee to really have a conversation. Ask them about their life. Ask them, one of my favorite questions is, what can you do so well that you could teach somebody else? Right. And when you do that, it gets them out of their head and thinking about what they do well, and it gives them an opportunity to shine, and you really get to see kind of behind the facade that they're putting up, or the fear.
We talked about fear, and we have a few minutes here before we have to turn the segment, but just to put a capper on it. So what I think about when I think about fear is the fear of failure a lot of times. And many times I think in organizations you never want to fail, but there's such a fear of failure that you don't take some risks to develop and to try new things and innovate or whatever it is. So how do you communicate to the employees that, hey, we're a culture that's going to support you if you do happen to fail on something, if you have an initiative that you think is something we should be doing, yeah, we don't know how it's going to work out exactly right now, but we're going to try it. How do you encourage that type of behavior without having the fear of failure?
Encourage the attempt, not the end result. And what happens is employees often learn from what they see happen to other employees. So if you're telling an employee, this is an environment where we encourage people to attempt, and sometimes you're going to fail. If they see other people doing that and not getting reprimanded, then they feel like, okay, well, let me try a few more times, because at the last place, they said we wanted to know the truth, and the person that raised their hand and gave them the truth got booted.
Thank you very much.
So you know what? I'm going to sit back and watch what the real culture is. So there's the overt culture, what we read in the handbook, and then there's the real culture, the one that when you go into your new office and one of your coworkers comes over and says, okay, here's what's really going on.
The grapevine.
Yeah, the grapevine is going to control the organization. And that's another topic that we need to discuss is the grapevine. If management learns how to proactively use the grapevine and make sure that they're feeding it good information and positive information, not just a plaque on the wall that says we're a team-based company. Who cares? Everybody's got that. But by your behavior. So as a manager, if you promote from your behavior that you encourage the attempt, even if someone fails, and then say, okay, let's debrief it. It was a great attempt. What did you learn? What did we learn? What did the team learn? That's a whole different environment now. You do that just a little bit and you're going to start creating some genius. The genius is in every company. Every company that I go into that's sick, the genius is there. They just haven't been able to extract it and awaken it. It's there, it's lying dormant. All they've got to do is really awaken it and start having conversations with people.
Great stuff from Kelly Graves. Again, Kelly, we've had you on the show a few times. We always learn a lot from you. We'll have you back again. His book, by the way, is The Management and Employee Development Review. It's out now from CRC Press. There's a link to it in his latest article we ran last week, so check that one out. And check out his book. It's a good one as well.